So what we're going to be doing today is learning how to do a GrimDark weathering effect. Now GrimDark is one of those things where it just looks old, ratty, somewhat desaturated, but still has pops of color. In the previous video, I previewed what we were doing, and we're basically going from this to this. And there's a big difference between the two. A little history on these. I did this years ago, and I liked it okay. It was a little monochromatic. I did the old rhinox hide and some kind of silver. I didn't even do a good job of removing the mold lines because I wasn't that confident at the time. Added in some gold, called it good, right? So I'd originally gone with a black undercoat, and then just a spray to get a little bit of a gradient. You can really see it on the back, just to kind of give you an idea where these things are from. And at the time, I didn't like it. I really was not satisfied with this at all. And just recently, I've been looking at different techniques for weathering and finally found a way that I really like it, which gives us this effect. Right? It doesn't take a lot of time. It doesn't take a lot of energy. It is a little bit trickier to work with than normal, what you would call Games Workshop acrylics. That being said, this was really easy and quite satisfying to do. So we're going to be talking about how to get this look today. To do this, you don't have to have done what I've done here to start with this as a base. I think anything will work. I don't think it's a bad idea to add a zenithal highlight or something like that. If you've got either a spray can or an airbrush, that'll work just fine. So any model will do. Just make sure you got it cleaned up. The next thing we're going to need are watercolor pencils. Now these are water-soluble colored pencils, and basically you can use them like old grade school watercolors where you just dip in some water with a brush and just get a little pigment off of there and just literally paint it right on. It's tricky in that if you lay down some material and then get it wet again, it's gonna start to kind of blur. But you can use that to your benefit. I'll show you where that is. So right here where you see these streaks, I had literally taken a little bit of this and just drawn on there. It looked like a scratchy pencil line, and then I just gone over with some water to kind of create those little rust streaks that you're seeing there. So there's benefit there. At a certain point, I go on dry, so I'll really sharpen the tip of this one here, and that'll give me this really rusty effect. You can also use this to kind of get in and essentially do the opposite of a recess shade, where you add some light rust into those recesses, which ends up being a pretty cool effect. To get this, it's pretty much get the tip of this pen, pick it up, get the tip wet, and just draw this in and then feather it out with a brush. So it's a pretty cool process, and I'm going to take you through it. I'm going to kind of minimize the amount of cuts that we're doing so you can just kind of see the whole thing, because when I'm learning how to do something, I want to see how we get this. It's not enough to just show a major jump in the process. So we'll go from there. So that being said, let's get on to it. Now I'm going to start and really focus in on this central panel here, because I feel like that's where all the action is, and I think I'm going to mess with the contrast here a little bit, because I think it's a little too much contrast. There we go. That's better. Not as dynamic, but I think that it works a little bit better. It's a little easier to see. So I'm just going to get my brush tip wet, and we're going to go in with our purple here. Right now, believe it or not, rust is not all brown. Rhinox hide is not the end-all be-all of your rust. It's actually quite a few different colors. So we're going to kind of get in there and just paint in some of these recessed corners. Now this is mainly about getting some darkness down inside of those recesses, and just make sure you can kind of see what I'm doing. Right. We're just highlighting those edges where things are going to really accumulate. Now this purple, it looks a little garish right now, but it's going to get buried. It's going to get mixed in with other colors, and that is going to make a big difference to everything else that we're doing. So, just using watercolor. I think, one thing I forgot to go over in the you're going to need this before you really start, and I hope you're not just doing this along with me, but you're going to need some matte varnish. Matte varnish is how you lock in your layers, how you make sure that things, when they do get wet, they don't like bleed essentially. We don't want that. So as you can see, I'm kind of going on really strong with that purple, and just going for it. Not really trying to win any awards for like realistic color at this point, although we are going to get there. So we're going pretty bold, just hitting some of those areas where it's really going to pool, especially down here towards the bottom. Let's see the little bug. Let's see if we can get that bug. I don't like killing things, but my camera moves, so you're dead. Now, as we're getting towards these areas here, we're just going to let that pool around the bases here. We're just, this is a lot like contrast paint, where we're not letting it like sop up or anything like that. We're treating this very much like it's a wash, because it really kind of is at this point. We're going to be building over top of this, so we're just kind of getting that purple everywhere. Just like that. Now again, it might seem a little bit crazy to be starting off with just such a bold color, and really a bold application of it. This doesn't look realistic right now, but it will. This is going to look very cool because we're going to be layering over this. Really, rust and grime and dirt and weathering is really just an accumulation of surface grime. So I think for fun, maybe I'm going to get a little bit of this purple, really thin down way into metal here, just for fun, just for funsies. These little areas here. Just put down a little bit of stain. So again, this reminds me very much of working with contrast paints, because it's very wet, it's very watery, and you want to a certain degree avoid pooling. So it feels very much like working with a contrast kind of paint. So yeah, now the trick is we just want to let that dry as much as we can, because we're going to go in with our next paint. Or really, I don't have to let it dry. I'm actually going to just go in here and start adding in another color, because I want this to be a little bit murky. Now, as you can see, it starts to really become almost muddy with that purple. And right here in this corner, that's perfect. We want that. We want that runny effect, because rust runs. It's a function of essentially water. If we let that get right into our recesses, it will look quite nice. Now we're going to start slipping in here a few other colors we want to start working with. So this little tan, we want it to pool up. We actually want this floating water, pigment in water effect, essentially. Just kind of build up on all these surfaces. Slipping into those bright reds. That's pretty good. We're gonna dip in here, grab some of this dark brown, merge that in there. We're just gonna blob it. Just like that. Killed the bug. Right there. Take that. Okay. Okay. It's important at a certain point to just let it sit down and rest in the normal position that it's going to be. And this is going to let all of the colors pool where they naturally would. Right? This is just like a general muddy version. We're going to go in with a little bit more detail later. We're going to draw right on this. I'm going to let this dry. I'm not going to touch it until we start filming again. And yeah, we'll go from there. Okay, so it's dry and it's darker, and you can kind of see how we've got that nice mottled appearance. Now, this has gone through several layers, so it's going to take quite a few more, but a way to speed this process up after you've got that initial modeling in there is to go in with just a straight pencil, start darkening it up, right? We're just adding a layer. Now this is very gritty, right? Just like that. And you can pretty much just start drawing where you want dark stuff to be. Now, like I said, I'm going pretty crazy with this all over town. Now you notice I'm not really worrying about any kind of patterns or anything. I'm just kind of cheaply scribbling it on there. Again, that's okay. This is going to end up working really well because these are, again, watercolor pencils. They have excellent coverage, especially when you get them wet. So I guess the way that I like to explain how these work really is that they are thick washes. Right? So they go on really easy, and you can just go in detail. You can just go crazy with it. Especially if you use the side and not just the tip. Right? So if we use the side, you can actually get some pretty decent coverage as is. Right? So we're just kind of staining now. And we'll just go in. Add little bits here. We're going to do this center part right here as well. And this just makes it significantly darker, which you can't totally tell on camera, but it's there. Okay. So we got that. And we're just going to wet that down. Right. Look at that. Nice and dark. Go super muddy. But you know, what I want. This does go on fairly transparent ultimately. Like it looks thick now, but once it dries, it's not bad. And then we can just start kind of going back and forth with the existing colors and just work it out. But you can kind of see how, you know, getting water over the front end of this kind of wrecks what's there. Like it covers over it. So again, this technique is all about layering. Layering up the effect you're looking for. Like that. Okay. Now I'm going to start removing some of this excess, and this is just like working with a wash where you just start wicking away any pooling that you have. Just stain the inside there. A little bit of dampness goes a long way. Just give that a few minutes to dry, just like before, and we'll take a look at it from there. Yay! So at this point, we're pretty dark, and we're kind of getting into that range of grit. Now, some of this we're gonna have to really get creative with. We will be using wash at a certain point, but before then, we want to add a little bit of variation to the surface because it's kind of boring right now. So to that, and any of the areas that I want to highlight, I'm going to start adding a couple of layers of just straight drawn on dry pigment. This isn't my brightest pencil. This is still a brown, but it comes on somewhat orange, especially in contrast with everything else. And we're just hitting up the edges. You can think of this as kind of like an edge highlight. So we're just gonna add it to like right here along the top. Let's just hit up those areas where we're gonna see some collection. So if we look at this, they're pretty close to each other. The big difference here is this one's had a wash. Now, in order to add a wash to this, we need to seal it against further water, right? Now, the way that we're going to do that is with our Vallejo matte varnish. Now, we're going to airbrush this on. I suppose it is possible to very gently paint this on, but I personally don't see how to do it. So I find this is best if you happen to have an airbrush. If you have a spray varnish, though, like a spray, could be gloss varnish, could be matte varnish, up to you. I think matte would look better. But if you happen to have a spray varnish, you can go ahead and use it here. As long as it's not too water-based, as long as it goes on and doesn't pool up, it should be fine. So we're going to go ahead and do that, and we'll be right back. So now, this isn't dry yet, but I want to show you it's okay if you get a little bit of sheen on there. It does dry matte. This is how I know it's been covered. I mean, it should have some on it, but this is just my way of being absolutely certain that what I put on there is going to stay. Because, for these next steps, it's probably going to get a little bit more wet. So I just wanted you to kind of see that shine that's on there right now and how that's going to go away as we put it in front of our little work fan while we pause so that it doesn't get stuck in the audio. Okay, so here it is, and it doesn't look much different. It's really very similar. Some of the details are a little bit matted down. If you look at it real carefully with a practiced eye, you can see that there's a film of varnish over everything, and that protects it. That's fine, but it's kind of muted down the color, and we're going to do some stuff to kind of raise that up and bring that contrast back. But first, we're going to apply a wash of Agrax Earthshade. So this is really super straightforward. You grab some kind of old brush. I use older brushes for washes. I'm using a flat brush and a fairly large brush because I don't want to have to sit down and draw a lot of brush strokes, or a lot of little places. I just want to get this in there as quick as I can, and then I'm going to let this run very naturally. So I'm going to be very liberal with it. I'm going to hit everything up and be very dirty all in one go. I don't really care if it's pooling so much. In fact, I kind of like it to pool a little bit in this case because this layer is all about the dirt and the moisture and the grime that's going to be hitting it anyway. So it's actually good if this is a little bit leaky and a little bit drippy, because it's going to feel more realistic ultimately. So we'll just kind of let that run down. I'm going to get everything wet, right? Sit everything up on the top there, and then I'm just going to let it set. Right, you can see that right there. Let that set right here. We're going to let that dry. And we'll see how it looks in a minute. Alright, so our wash has dried, and as you can see in these areas it has become significantly darker. It just really pushed those deep edges. You know, it's no longer looking as flat. You know, and if you think back to the purple, it's not so visible anymore, but it is there as like an underlay for just some basic color. So with this pencil, this is our lightest rust color we have. What we're going to do is we're just going to bring back some of that brightness. Now, to keep things consistent, I'm going to keep my original back over here, just so that they kind of all look like they've been through the same ringer together. And really, the trick here is just to go on dry as you can and to just be rough with it. Because at this point, this is all the rust that's just sitting on top. And you know, sitting in crevices and things like that. So we're being really rugged with this, and we're you know, breaking up. Now, if we need to, we can always go through and wet it down to kind of give it a little bit of life. You know, smooth it in a little bit. So a little bit of that water back, you know, like that. If we want to push that again, we can just add a little water to our pencil and just wash it in, just like we've been doing. Right? Go in, let that dry. So we're going to go ahead and just do that here. I'm probably going to speed it up because there's not much more to say after that. And then we'll just probably call this close to done. So as you can see in the previous clip, I just sped up. Really, we just re-soaked in and reapplied our brightest rust color. You know, we went in with a brush, reinforced that, and then just add some scuffing to really kind of reinforce the grittiness of our rust. Right? And that's it. You know, we've been able to achieve what we wanted, and it doesn't take a lot of effort. It does take time. That's probably the one thing I've noticed about this the most, is there's a lot of waiting for things to dry. And then, you know, the matte varnish is a step, and, you know, obviously if we're going to be doing a lot of play with this, we're going to want to varnish it again. But the effect is really great. I like it. You know, frankly, it looks even better in real life. But yeah, that's pretty cool. So, if you like this video, you know, please leave a like. If you want to see more videos like this, hit subscribe. That's how I know people are watching. Other than that, this has been a wonderful tutorial with you, and I hope to see you next time.